Good evening, listeners, and welcome to Talk Back with Gillian. I'm your host, Gillian Burton Persaud, and I'll be with you up until 8 hours this evening, bringing you the trending political issues in our country today. Well, we have lots and lots of information to bring your way here on Talk Back with Gillian, and we'll bring you the excerpt from last week's press conference by Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Persaud. We have All Guyana Awaits the verdict on matters before the CCJ, the government-funded trip of the 6 ministers to the CCJ hearing, and the new portfolios for the resigned ministers of government with dual citizenship. And then we'll also look at GCOM's lawyer and the recommendation that no new voters list is needed for elections. However, we'll begin our evening with our quote for this evening, and it is, "We may have all come on different ships, but we are in the same boat now." We may have all come on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. And that is a quote from one of the speeches by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Well, Talk Back with Gillian this evening. On May 15, the coalition completed 4 years in government, and the leader of the opposition, Dr. Persaud, had to say this about their tenure.
Over the weekend, the incumbent government moved into its fifth and final year in government. 4 years that expired, and this is their 5th year being the government of Guyana. And predictably, the Ministry of the Presidency issued a press release lauding their achievements over the past 4 years in office. And the press release was quite bizarre because once again it repeated what we believe is a symptom of a disease, aloof mind. The multiple lies that they have told to Guyanese people about their achievements, their long list of achievements. And when people try to, ordinary people across Guyana, even APNU supporters, try to match those achievements with the reality of life on the ground, they find a huge gap between them. And so the government, if I just summarize what they lauded as their achievement, was the return of democracy to Guyana. 2, they said that their policies have impacted favorably on every aspect of life in Guyana, from the coastland to the hinterland in our riverine and indigenous communities. So everyone has benefited from all of these policies. They lauded the increase, the old age pension and social assistance increase. They talk about securing 10,000 jobs for sugar workers. They talk about support to our rice farmers. And they talk about ending pervasive corruption. Now, this is the statement from the government about their achievements in the past 4 years. But what's the truth? What's the reality of life in Guyana today? And so we know for a fact that over 30,000 persons who were working at the time this government took office have lost their jobs. That's 30,000 Guyanese who were working and feeding their families and earning an income and having the dignity of work, now no longer have a job because of the policies of this government. Secondly, we know that they are not attracting major new investments. Outside of the oil and gas sector, which started under the PPP, their investments have dried up. Totally, foreign investments. And local investment is almost non-existent now. Non-existent. The only thing that a few people are benefiting from are the high prices for land in prime locations where the oil companies want to locate one or two of their facilities. That's the only thing that is happening. But foreign investments as well as local investments have dried up. So we have not only lost jobs, but the prospect of creating new jobs is diminished. Because oil and gas, as I said before, will give us 2,000 new jobs, and we lost 30,000 jobs, and we're not going to create many new jobs in the other sectors. So it's going to get progressively worse. Secondly, we know for a fact that this government has increased taxes and is now collecting $88 billion more per year than what the PPP collected in 2014. $88 billion more. That's coming from ordinary people as well as the business community. So you're paying more taxes on your food, on your clothing, because they've increased the valuation rates at customs. You're paying more taxes on water, on electricity, etc. that were not there before. In fact, some of them didn't have any VAT or any tax. So that's a fact of life. They're taking $88 billion more per year out of people's pockets. Fourthly, they have borrowed $900 million US from a combination of foreign and local sources. So the total debt when we left was about $1.1 billion. That is after 23 years. They have almost borrowed the equivalent of that whole sum from that is one of the things, their achievement in the last 4 years. We have seen a skyrocketing of the cost of living. That's number 5. So as I said, if you go look at your water bill, your electricity bill, almost everything, the licenses that you have to pay for, everything has gone up. So I was speaking to some housewives yesterday, and they said to me, we have to now take more money to the supermarket to get the same items or the market that we were getting before. So cost of living has gone up. Crime is on the increase, but what is even worse is that we have no plan to address it, except some inane utterings from a useless minister. Absolutely none. So that is their track record. The incompetence is almost unbelievable. 4 years of incompetence. Healthcare has declined. People confront that every single day when they go to the hospitals. And then for them to say they've ended pervasive corruption, when this is the most corrupt government in our entire history, in the colonial times as well as since we're independent. Every single week there's a new scandal involving some APNU person or a minister. Every single week. So that is their achievement in 4 years, instead of what they're saying. And then on the democracy side, that they laud as making strides in democracy. They love to speak about local government elections. Oh, we held local government elections after a long period, and 2 local government elections. So we have seen the list that they used for local government elections was perfect, the voters list, But we saw how they sought to rig the elections by forging candidate signature. That's the true nature of the APNU. And when you talk about democracy, here is where the no confidence vote was concerned. It is unheard of in the British Commonwealth that a government would behave the way it has done in relation to any no confidence vote that it suffers, where it refuses to accept the no confidence vote and acts with impunity, says it's business as usual. That is unheard of. This is their democratic credential. And then when you go to the court, you threaten unrest if the decision goes against you, and that comes from the Attorney General. This is their credential, their democratic credential. So this has been, we have had 4 years of failure, 4 years of deterioration. And some people say, oh, it's only 4 years. That's their new excuse. Well, how much longer do we need to understand that this government doesn't have a vision, and every single year that they stay in office, we are going to slide downwards, oil money or no oil money, every single year they stay in office. So the 4 years argument is enough to show us a trend in government, what is happening already with this government, that we don't need to see more, because the longer they stay there, there's no plan for improving. And so when I look at this, it's bothered me. So let us go to ordinary people. Because when the government says these things, it sounds nice on paper. If you're a rice farmer, how have your life improved? First of all, they said they open new markets. But the rice farmers, they cut $1 billion from drainage and irrigation. They've increased their land charges for rice farmers. So significant sums, sometimes by 300-400% land and water rates. They've removed the taxes from fertilizers and pesticides. They put taxes on fertilizer and pesticides, and they put taxes on your machinery. So that's it. Are the farmers better off today? The answer is no. Let's talk about the miners, the small miners who voted overwhelmingly. What have they had from this government? The first thing is that they had a 2% final tax under the PPP. This government removed it and increased it to a 28% tax. It's no longer final tax. After the public outcry and we said we'll reverse it, they brought it down back, but moved it on a sliding scale from 2 to 3.5%. So we made it clear we'll go back to 2%. So the miners have seen a deterioration. They increased the tributers tax by 100%. We had to fight to get it down back. That is the taxes that the miners collected. They have passed legislation to say that if the small miners don't have records when GRA approaches them, they can go to jail now. How many small miners have records in the hinterland of their purchases? Who will give them a receipt if they buy 2 drums of fuel? They have not spent any money. We've seen the sad story of hinterland roads. How are the miners going to carry their equipment into the hinterland? And you see Lethem Road now, once again, in a disastrous state. But I'm talking about other mining roads. They've increased the taxes now, the 14% tax. They put it on the VAT on machinery and equipment for mining. So the miners now, that's on. Miners now have to pay to sell their gold to the gold board. I give you 5 policies that have led to a decline in the lot of the environment for our miners. So are the miners better off now today? In the 4 years, they're worse off. Let's talk about sugar workers. Sugar workers have lost 7,000 jobs, and people surrounding the sugar industry, another 4,000 or 5,000 jobs. Are the sugar workers better off today? They've done that. They have not received any increase. The remaining workers have not received a single salary increase for all 4 years. 0%. First time in our history, even under Burnham. They've dismantled the arrangement that had been there since Burnham era for the API, the Annual Production Incentive. 60-something years that had been in place, they discontinued that. The workers had to fight for their severance. Our sugar workers better off today. Let's talk about taxi drivers and people who do public transport. What has been their environment? Today, they have to pay more for licenses. They now can't find the used tires any more longer because this government believes we must only use new tires in Guyana. They ban used tires. And so soon, as soon as that kicks in fully, we're going to be in trouble. Although in the US, they sell used tires. And then they ban vehicles over 8 years old. So now if you buy a taxi or some vehicle for public transport, you have to pay more because the vehicles, that has added a premium price for the more recent vehicles. So they're worst off today too, the taxi drivers. Let's talk about the children of Guyana. They took away $8 billion in 4 years from the children of Guyana. $8 billion. If you take $10,000 per year, multiply by 167,000 school kids we had, multiply by 4 years in office, 4 years in office, this is what you'll get. So you now have close to $8 billion that in the period that they'll be in, this 5 years in office, because they will take it away from this year too. So the children, they've taken away money from them. They're worse off. Let's talk about the pensioners. So they put here the increased pensions. And now the pensioners have higher electricity bill. They used to get a subsidized electricity, and they had free water. Now, if you talk to many pensioners, they show you their bills, $47,000, $30,000 in water bills. And it was free in the past under the PP. The pensioners have lost out. The students at the University of Guyana, they have lost out. They have to pay 35% more on their fees than they had before. So who is really benefiting? Who is really benefiting? What about the forestry workers? We're producing about half of what we were producing in 2014. The Forestry Commission has gone bankrupt, but thousands have lost jobs in the sector because they've increased taxes on the machinery and equipment for forestry. So I'm trying to find out who is really benefiting. It can't be the businessmen because they're complaining all the time about more taxes. So who really is benefiting? If it is not the vendors, definitely. Not the vendors, not ordinary people. But it is this cabal that is in government, the ministers, their friends, and their family. And you see this in the contracts that they awarded. I pointed out just a few weeks ago that this 20% that they say they want to give to small contractors is the cover for them to give their families and friends contract. And we've seen it already. They take their own. You don't have to go very far. It's the Minister of Housing, Minister of Telecommunications, but almost every minister now is in some business with companies linked to them, doing business in their own ministries and in their government. And this is how they ended pervasive corruption. In 4 years of this government, they've only submitted Integrity Commission statement once. From 2000 to 2014, the PPP submitted, the ministers and others, every single year, their statements to the Integrity Commission. They talk about restoring the image of Guyana and their achievement. And the first U.S. State Department report to say that government corruption is a source of money laundering now. First time in our history. That's how they restore international reputation. Two, we're now known around the world for a government that will hang on to power at any cost and not respect democracy and no confidence motion. People are laughing us around the world that you would argue that 34 is the majority of 65. We become the laughing stock of the region and anyone who is familiar with Guyana. And as though if that is not enough, we're now known around the world for a parliament that honors a convicted terrorist. And this is how they restore the image of Guyana. Now, the people, we just believe we're totally incompetent. I pointed out you had a huge oil and gas function in Texas a few weeks ago, where the government should have showcased Guyana and speak about our policies and the policy framework that we have developed. We were absent there. Foreigners are defining how the oil sector must go in Guyana. And guess who will be left out? Our people, if they're defining where we will go because of the incompetence of this government. And I heard the presentation about Guyana. Somebody made a presentation, and in the presentation they didn't talk about oil and gas. They said, oh, Guyana is in the northern part of South America, as though the people who attended the conference wouldn't know where Guyana is. Everybody knows that now because we have 5 billion barrels of potential oil out there. That's their presentation. And I know we have 30 birds in 200 and something bird species in Georgetown. That is the kind of thing people laugh at you when you go to international conferences with this kind of wishy-washy approach. Governments. This is the image of the country. We have a missing government. They don't do anything except the shows, cutting ribbons, outreaches, etc. And they talk about 4 years of achievement. They said we ended blackout too. That's one. Every year they put out an ad, they ended blackout. Not only are we having blackout now, but there's no plan to put in new generating capacity. They said they ended floods. But the PPP now hired a brigade of people to throw garbage, so we may have some more floods in the future. So we throw garbage now in some of the drains for them to have a flood and bad name. That's the silliness that we have for government today. We have a government where all the ministers are implicated in scandals, or many of them, and the president goes and without holding a press conference says, I'll be reshuffling.
Well, you were listening there to Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Barjagdio, at his last week's press conference on May 16, where he was taking a look at the 4-year tenure completed by the coalition government and what they did. We'll take a quick look at some of the points that came out of that press conference from his comments. And one is the fact that the government was highlighting, celebrating the return of democracy to Guyana. One needs to wonder, what is there to celebrate about a returning of democracy to Guyana after May 15, 2015? To my mind, there was no return of democracy there. What happened is that democracy was taken away from Guyana. It was trampled upon. As there is this famous calypso, you're making a mockery of democracy. That is what is happening in Guyana today with the coalition government. I'm making a mockery of democracy. How can you celebrate a return of democracy when after the elections, any person or persons who was known or suspected to have been an activist or supporter of the People's Progressive Party Civic, they lost their jobs. They were threatened. Their jobs were threatened. Their livelihood. Many went on the breadline just because they were openly supportive, or it was suspected that they supported the PPP Civic administration. Is that a return to democracy? That is trampling on the rights of persons, because very well in the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, it is saying in Articles 19 to 22 that you have the right to choose, the right to associate, the right to affiliate yourselves with organizations, the right to have a say in your governments and the governing of your country. We saw after May 15, 2015, that wasn't happening. At one point in time, there was a circular that went out to the public servants that said that prohibited them from going on social media and making negative comments about the government. Is that a return to democracy? Your freedom of speech was taken away. So I don't see where it is that this coalition government could want to celebrate a return to democracy in Guyana when your freedom, your rights was taken away as it relates to freedom of speech, freedom of expressions, freedom of association. And then we looked at, they also claimed that they ended pervasive corruption. Well, if we look at the list of scandals and corrupt activities that has been taking place since the coalition government came into office, it's like every week, every other week, you have one. Because we're counting, it's over 55 or 70, I think, like that, corruption scandals that has been listed by the PPP Civic and also international oversight body recently bringing out a report saying that Guyana, was one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Something that never came out before. And so when you're talking about ending pervasive corruption, you have to take a more in-depth look at what is going on. As the leader of the opposition said, friends and families, contracts going to friends and families, friendism and nepotism, and that was labeled at the PPP administration, but then you're coming into office and you're doing the very same things, and it's open, it's there. It's not something that can't be found or is something that is being whispered. It is something that evidence is there. But the reality is that 30,000 persons lost their jobs from May 15, after the coalition government came into government. 30,000 persons lost their jobs. Hinterland persons, the sugar workers, persons who worked with agencies that closed down. As he said, the forest industry. 30,000 jobs lost, that is the reality. It means that 30,000 families are suffering. And it could be more because sometimes one person supports two families. You have a mother and you might have younger siblings that you're supporting. That is the reality. No new investments. Nobody's coming to invest in Guyana with a crime situation. Persons don't want to come because we don't have a solution to the crime in our country today. Every day we're seeing 2, 3 robberies, persons coming on that tax, whether it's in the homes, whether it's in their businesses, whether they're walking on the road, they're coming on that attack by criminal elements. And the Minister of Public Security, who wants to go to the upper bracket of government, wanting to be nominated to take up the prime ministerial candidacy of the coalition government, and don't have an answer for the crime situation in this country. We see the increase in taxes, taxes and fees and license. So you're paying more for things and there is no real increases in salaries. You're looking at the government already borrowed $99 million US, which will put a burden on the country later on because you borrow, you have to pay it back. Increased in cost of living. You go into markets, you go into supermarkets, you go into stores, everything has gone up. So you have to pay more for items. Then you're looking at, as we said earlier, the escalating crime situation and no plan to deal with it. All these security-minded persons and legal persons, and they can't come up with a plan. They had all the plans before they got into office, but now they're there. The plans seem to have disappeared. A decline in health care system. Quite recently, we saw where it was published where some persons were concerned as it relates to dialysis treatment, persons with kidney failures, and one of their colleagues having passed away because of lack of medical care. Medicines weren't there, drugs weren't there to deal with it, and so they have become afraid and worried what will happen to them. Then we look at the fact where the local government elections, return of democracy. We held local government elections twice. Yes, you held it twice, and you were beaten twice. And the fact of the matter is the last showing was very poor. And then we also had the evidence of forgery of signatures to form the NDC candidates to go up for these elections. And person said, I never put my name there. I never signed to that. And having to have withdrawn from the local government elections some NDCs and municipalities because persons did not put their signatures, but it was put there. So rigging a system, and you're talking about democracy, refusal to adhere to our constitution as it relates to the no confidence motion and the unilateral appointment of the GCOM chairman, which we'll come to quite shortly. And we see this happening, and you're talking about democracy. A government who has to uphold the constitution, whose duty is bounded by the fact that you are governing your country based on the policies and the acts in the Constitution, and the fact that you're the custodian of the Constitution of this country and you're violating the Constitution. You don't want to do what is being stated in the Constitution because it doesn't suit your agenda. So that was the leader of the opposition, giving an insight into the coalition government and their 4-year tenure in office. Nothing really happening, and we could go on and on about it, but we don't see anything bearing fruit from this 4 year. So there was nothing to shout about, nothing to celebrate. You know, we're even in a worse place than we were before. And this is the reality of it, and we have to be able to look at it, analyze it, and we have to be able to take ourselves away from it because we need betterment in our lives. Well, on May 8th, 9th, and 10th, we had the appeal hearings of the two submissions to the Caribbean Court of Justice here in Trinidad. It was heard in Trinidad, and the first one was the unilateral appointment of the chairman to GCOM, and the other one was based on an appeal for the no confidence motion. Well, those of you who had a chance to look at it, and you can still have a chance to hear it, look at it at the proceeding. It's on YouTube. You just go to the CCJ hearings and you will find it there. You know, it's good if you didn't get a chance to view it, to see what really was taking place. And the fact of the matter is that the government at both hearings had an uphill task to prove the case of why the appeals should not be granted. And those appeals were put in by the opposition and in connection with the unilateral appointment of the GCOM chairman. And, you know, you would see where they were questioned of a process that should have taken place and a communication between the president and the leader of the opposition. And I think there were those judges, those learned men, they were quite baffled. 3 lists of persons were put forward by the leader of the opposition, and the president couldn't find one person who was fit and proper. 18 names, and out of those 18 names, nobody was fit and proper for him to choose from those lists. Even after the leader of the opposition would have asked for what was really the criteria, because I know that when the first list was drawn up, it was based on what the Constitution was asking for. And those 6 names went forward. And then he said, no, nobody fit and proper on this list. And then another second list based on what he was looking for. And could you believe it? 4 retired judges. You had legal persons and 1 other outstanding Guyanese who served in the military at a high level was placed there. None of those persons were fit and proper. A 6th list went in, which also even included the name of a high-ranking retired military person who also served as a GCOM chairman, and that no person was fit and proper on that list. But lo and behold, the president chose his person who he wanted to go forward as the chairman of GCOM. And so the opposition appealed that move. That went to the CCJ. It's there, it's waiting for ruling. And also the no confidence motion, where we have this new type of mathematics, where in a National Assembly of 65 sitting persons, parliamentarians, you are saying that you need 34 persons for that no confidence motion to pass. That is an absolute majority instead of 33. And I could remember listening, watching the proceedings, and one of the judges asking, I think it was the president of the CCJ asking, or one of the other judges, but the judge asked the question. So, it takes 33 votes out of 65 to run the country, but it needs 34 to remove the government. How are you going to get this 34 to 32? Somebody has to be a phantom. So it's quite puzzling, and it's interesting for us to see how, we are going to hear the outcome, the verdict. We were all anxious. We were waiting to hear what these learned men are going to come up with. And it's very interesting, that verdict. So we are waiting to hear the date when the verdict will be issued. And, as the opposition said, whatever, they would abide by the ruling of the court, whatever it is, they abide by it. We don't have a fuss and a fight. But we're saying that we don't agree with the ruling of the High Court, the appeal court. The High Court had its ruling, which went in the favor of the opposition. Then the government appealed it at the level of the appeal court, and they won that appeal. And the opposition is saying, no, we don't accept that. So it has gone to the CCJ. So let's wait and hear what's coming out of that. Now we come to the fact where, with a very CCJ hearing, six ministers of government left this country for a couple of days to go sit in on the hearing. Well, just like each and every one of us who sat in front of our televisions and watched the entire proceedings, they couldn't sit in their offices and watch it. You took 6 of them to go, not even 1 or 2, apart from the Attorney General. You had 6 ministers of government who went there. You had the Minister of Education, you had the new Minister of Business, the new Minister of Public Service, you had the Minister of Indigenous Affairs, the Minister of Communities, and the Minister of Youth, Culture, and Sports. Wow, 6 persons had to go. And their expenses, based on what the new Director General of the Ministry of the Presidency said, their expenses were paid by the government, taxpayers' money. And that was a decision that was made at the level of cabinet, and you had to pay for accommodations and airfares and meals and transportation. Hard-earned taxpayers' dollars going to send 6 ministers to sit down and listen to a hearing at the CCJ level. And it was explained away by the Director General, Mr. Joseph Harman, who said that, when you have these court proceedings, you need persons to give a showing apart from the attorneys who are there to represent your interests, because in the courtroom, the judges take that in as a factor, your interest in the matter. But then 6 ministers of government? Come on. That was a grand showing. And a lot of money had to be spent, because they're not going to stay in any, second-class hotels and that. They're going to take top of the line. We know the coalition government, how they move, top of the line. Everything has to be, branded. So that would have been quite a few millions of dollars there gone down the drain. That could have served for something else. We're spending this kind of money on things that are not really important, when the fact of the matter is you have children, families who need assistance. They need to be looked after. There's so many things that could be put in place to help people to have an easier life, the good life that you promised. But it's not happening. We're seeing these ministers just flying all over the world. It's like if it's vacation time for them, they're just round there. And the thing about it, nothing tangible comes back to Guyana. If they were going out there and coming back with things that would have helped develop the lives of persons, create job opportunities and that, we didn't have a problem. But it's not happening. They're going there and you don't know what they went about, or you know very little, and when they come back, nothing comes back to the Guyanese people. Nothing at all. So we're losing instead of regaining at a time when our country is declining rapidly. And, it is so sad. It is so sad. then we need to look at the fact of the ministers of government who opted to resign from government as it relates to the dual citizenship, and those sitting in parliament. You know, they were given new portfolios, and these new portfolios are now named director generals. So they have moved from ministers of government of their various ministries, and they have now become director generals of these ministries. Well, my view on that is these director generals is not a step down. I don't see it as a step down. I see it as a camouflage appointment, and they have stepped up. They're still in charge of the ministries, just that they're not ministers of government, and they don't sit in parliament as parliamentarians, but they're going to run the show. And I said that the last time I was here on the program, that it's all a window dressing that is taking place. They do not want to give up their citizenship to another country. They rather keep it. Now, this government who says it's caring, this government who says it has the people's interest at heart, where is the patriotism? Because definitely the fact these ministers choose their citizenship in another country over Guyana. Because the Constitution states that you couldn't have dual citizenship. Yes, the fact of the matter that there were persons on both sides of the house who were sitting with dual citizenship. But you have attained the level of a minister, which is a very high level. You are the highest level of decision making in Guyana. You run the show. And when the time comes for you to choose, you decide, you know what? I'd rather give up my seat in parliament. I'd rather give up my ministerial position instead of giving up one of my citizenship, which is the foreign one. It tells us when you're going to talk about which this thing all emerged out of the no confidence motion and the vote by Mr. Charandas Persaud, and you labeled him to be such a bad person. You're in no better place than him. You're in no better place than him. Because you are saying that I choose the other country's citizenship over serving at a high level in my country. You're saying that. And we also look at the fact where even the son-in-law of the president, Mr. Dominic Gaskin, he said it plain in an interview. He has no intention of giving up his British citizenship. It is said that he was born in Britain, and he also have Guyanese citizenship. He said because he don't have no great political aspirations. Are we to assume that those other persons, ministers who resigned, and because they refused to give up their dual citizenship, they're saying that they don't have no great political aspirations? Then what were you doing there in the first place? Then you went there for the perks. You went there for the money. And it's sad when you have to hear these utterances coming out of the mouths of persons who are there to protect your interests as a citizen of this country, who are there to help you to get to that higher level, that higher place in your life. And they're saying plain to you, you know, I don't have no great political aspirations, so what were you doing there for serving as a minister? If you knew you had no great political aspirations, then you should not have taken up the portfolio in the first place. You wasted time. You were untrue to those who voted you into office, those who selected and put you there. You were hypocritical to the entire process. So you can't point your fingers at any person. And Mr. Gaskin went on to say, because it's there in the media, that he prefers to serve in the private sector where he came from. Openly, you know. So how did you get there? Then again, we come back to the fact of nepotism. You know, the son-in-law of the president, and so you put there. Even though you came from another political party, but the president's son-in-law, so we find a space for you. We make you minister of government. But when the going gets tough, you say, tata, bye-bye, I'm out of here. I have no interest. I am not going to give up my goodies for your little pittance. And, it tells us as citizens of this country, we need to examine closely, those persons who we put in office. What are they, what are their interests? What are they really there for? Are they really looking out for our interests? Then it tells us why we're having this type of governance that we're having. Do as I like, do as I please. I really can't be bothered about what's happening. But then we see the reshuffling, the shifting around, and the reassigning, and the redesignations of persons there. It tells us also that is why the crime situation has gone out of control, and now no plans are coming, because persons have taken up positions without having an avid interest to the responsibilities that they have at their table. And so those who are the ordinary citizens are left to suffer. We have these persons, and these are new portfolios that have been created. Because in the Ministry of Business, there was always, yes, a Director General, but nobody was ever appointed. So like it was lying there waiting for Mr. Gaskin when the time came for him to take it up. And we have all the other ministers who came off now being Director Generals of their ministries. So these are new portfolios that have been created to accommodate these ministers. And it said that they're there to give guidance to those who came on and the likes of the matter. But we're creating more and more positions for persons higher up, while we have our young people waiting in line for jobs. And they're crying out for these jobs. We heard from the press conference, those who listened to the press conference, the extract from it. We're talking about oil and gas. Everything is about oil and the oil money coming to Guyana. But you know what? Only 2,000 persons will actually benefit from these jobs that will be created or will be available within the oil sector. So what happens to the other 28 and counting? Because every time a high school have a graduation, we have students, thousands of students coming out. Many of them, some of them don't go on to further studies, to higher levels of education. They want to get into the job market. Then we have every year, University of Guyana have a graduation. And we have hundreds of persons graduating from the University of Guyana with their degrees. If they are not already employed, they are going out there looking for jobs. Where are the jobs for them? We don't have job creations for these persons, but we keep creating jobs higher up in the government for persons who are already there, who are already getting in on the perks, who are already, enjoying the benefits. And you take them a little higher and the benefits go a bit higher. So what are we talking about? And then we tell our young people on a campaign trail, yes, we're going to have jobs for them. We're creating jobs for them. But instead of that, they're out there waiting. How long can they wait? Frustration is stepping in. They don't know where next to turn. They want to go out there on their own. They want to start their lives as adults. But the opportunity does not present itself. It is not available to them. They have to wait for the oil to start coming, pumping, and then all these things gonna happen. I keep saying that persons who try to say that or make excuses for the coalition that they're just there 4 years, they're now entered their 5th year of governance. When you're in opposition, you plan to take over government. That is your major reason for being there. You plan to take over the government because you think you can do a better job than the current government in managing the affairs of your country. So when you get the chance and you get into government, you're supposed to pull out all the stops, all your plans, and get it activated. But instead of that, we're seeing this government in a deactivation mode. You know, they're stationary, they're not moving and going anywhere, and so the country is stagnant, it's stationary. We're not alive and breathing and moving. And we need more of that to happen. We need our country to move. We need development. We need to be proactive. But that can't happen if you don't have a vision. All you're doing is going around the place, placing blame. And you're looking back and blaming an administration that was there before. And oh, you didn't do this and you didn't do that. But then you're here now, you correct it and put it in place. Because that is why you got there in the first place. To make things better than it was before. But we're not seeing that happening. And so it's sad when we have to look at these issues, when we have to look at the state of corruption in our country, when we have to look at a government who does not adhere to the constitution of the country, when we have to look at a government who does not have a policy to take this country forward, a government that has become an international embarrassment to the citizens of the country. You're going out there and you're like you're in la la land. You don't know what's happening, what's going on. You're making pronouncements and statements that are embarrassing. You're making decisions and you're putting out policies that are not complete and that will not really benefit the people of this country. So we need to ensure that things happen. And the only way that can happen is that if who we have is not doing what we want, then you have to go. We have to say goodbye to you. We don't owe you the right to sit down and go down under with you and your policies that are not in sync with a fast track moving world with development. We don't have that right to do that. And then we come to the other point. We were talking earlier about GCOM and the unilateral appointment, a process that should have been followed and the communication link was not right, and we need to have things happening. And we heard about the government kept saying that, oh, we need a new voters list. We need a new list to come on stream. So before we have to do new house-to-house registration so that this list could be fixed. And, you're asking yourself, and quite a few persons asked me the question, what is GCOM really doing? You have staff. We're paying staff. You're paying executives to run an agency who's supposed to be ready at all times to ensure whenever an election, if it is called overnight, for some reason or the other, you're supposed to be in preparedness mode to start kick in that machinery and get it up and going. You're saying you're not ready. You can't do it. Yes, you can do it, then you say, no, you can't do it. And it's the back and forth. And you need a new house-to-house registration. And persons going to be left off the list. And you have so many dead persons on the list. So these lists are not cleansed all the time. We know that reports going to GCOM from the registrar or the persons who would have passed away and that. You're not doing your work. Then you're malingering according to labor laws. You're malingering. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. But, up and behold, we have one of the attorneys of GCOM, Miss Excellence Dazel, who came out recently at a statutory meeting and voiced her opinion that there is no need for a new voters list according to the acts in the Constitution. Well, she came under fire for that. And the Director General of the Ministry of the Presidency, as we say, the acting president, the assistant president, because he's helping the substantive president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana with his duties, he's saying that the government is not prepared to act on legal opinion given to commissioners of GCOM by the body's legal advisor. And he also went on to say that the government is prepared to act on statements that are provided by GCOM and not an individual within the organization, whether it's a commissioner or a staff. Again, bullyism. Where is the democracy? Where is the adherence to our Constitution? You employ somebody to give you legal advice, but when they're ready to give you, you're saying no. because it's not in keeping with your agenda, you know you're not accepting it. Well, the attorney has spoken, but the government has responded that they're not going to accept it. It has to be a decision coming out of the body of the organization. And in that, I think it means the chairman, who is a political appointment and not from any commissioner or staff. They don't want it from that. It has to come out from maybe the higher levels of GCOM. Well, no new voters list needed. And then we heard over the last week that they're saying, oh, we should be ready for a November election. So maybe they have an insight on what the decision coming out of the CCJ would be. But we're all waiting to hear what that is going to happen. And as we spoke about all the other scandals and that kinds of things that is going on, you know, every week, every other week, you have a new scandal coming out. We had recently, over the weekend, where a document surfaced about a $9,000 that was deposited into the bank account of the Minister of Public Infrastructure, Mr. Patterson, from a Chinese company. He's saying that that money was money that was placed there for him to travel to attend a forum, and that was there. Well, we know, you know, there is a lot of, let's wait and see what's going to come out of that. You know, the document surfaced and persons are questioning. Yes, you're interested to know, you know, what's going on. And it's sad that this particular minister keeps coming under the radar, and, you know, so much is being, you know, coming out there about him. Not nice, you know. We need persons who will do us good in the light of our country. And the fact that Minister Cathy Hughes said in a recent interview, she alluded to the fact that corruption is not only in the government. Corruption is overall in Guyana. Well, could you believe that? A minister of government who herself 2 weeks before, was fingered or pointed to in a scandal where she has a PR company and the government ministries, including her very ministries, were sending monies, paying for ads to be published by her company. And therefore she said no, and then she said, oh, she didn't know about it, and all the fiasco about that. She now is talking that corruption is not only in the government, it's across Guyana. Well, they said open confession is good for the soul. So, those were some of the things you heard we had to discuss this evening. Sorry, it was so much I couldn't take your calls. I do hope next week I can have a guest and we can have some interaction with your telephone calls. But, you know, it's getting more and more heavy and heated as the time goes by. So, as we await the decision for the CCJ ruling, and, you know, everybody's on tippy toes about that, and we have the independence celebrations coming up, the 52nd, 53rd independence anniversary coming up there, and the carnival. You know, we like to be in with everything. So we have a carnival coming up. I don't know where some person's going to get the money to spend with all the activities they're having there. But if you're going to go out and celebrate, please do so widely. Look at your dollars and cents, you know, because it's hard to get these days. So as I come to the end of my program for this evening, I'll close as usual with an extract from one of the speeches of Dr. Chedi Jagan, and he said, we cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people acted a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one thing we have, and that is our attitude. So we need to work on our attitudes. I do hope that the ministers of government, or some of them, are listening, or their advisors, and can tell them they need to work on their attitudes if you can't change anything. Well, it's so long for now, and I was happy for you to have me in your homes. I want to wish you a good night and a blessed week ahead of you. As you go out, those of you who are going to go out to celebrate independence and participate in the carnival, do have clean and healthy fun. Be careful. Drink, but don't overdrink. And if you drink, as they say, don't drive. Have a designated driver. For those of you who are going to stay at home and relax, well, I wish you great relaxation so that you can re-energize yourself to go forward with the new week. Until then, I am Gillian Burton Persaud saying goodbye for now, and thanks for having me in your homes. I'll be back next week with Talk Back with Gillian.